Hello and good afternoon, and welcome back to the Wrestling Hideout. I am your host Liam, here with the illustrious.
Hi, I'm Rhys.
Very special day, ladies and gentlemen. Rhys, after today, is moving the other side of the pond.
Can't wait for her to see that.
So today, ladies and gentlemen, we are going on about the Mount Rushmore of importance in wrestling. So this is a part one of a two-part series or duo where we are talking about the importance of wrestling, the importance to wrestling and wrestlers. So please remember that this isn't about the wrestlers today. This is about our opinion on who the four most important people are to wrestling in our experience.
Why, there's wrestlers on it.
And there's wrestlers on it. Okay.
So when I came up with this idea, my plan was a Mount Rushmore of like the people who were most important to the wrestling business, and then like our personal Mount Rushmore of like favorites.
Okay.
Because like my Mount Rushmore aren't wrestlers or people that I really like that much, if that makes sense.
It does. Do you want to start the whole fucking thing again, or are you happy to carry on?
Nah, we'll just edit around it. It's fine.
Okay. So,
Outtakes happen, people.
So, before that, is there anything you have feedback on the week's wrestling? We're just going to cover that in a couple of minutes now.
I've not really kept too much up with it because obviously it's been a busy week for me. Cat's back in AEW though.
Well,
So
yeah,
that's
we had the CM Punk Samoa Joe match. 15 years in the making. 24 years since they first had a wrestling match. Now think about that, ladies and gentlemen. 24 years.
It's crazy. Do you know what? Talking of timelines, I was looking at the John Cena AJ Styles feud.
Okay.
Can you believe that's 7 years old?
Insane. It honestly feels like yesterday that Mr. Phenomenal came to WWE.
Like, COVID has messed up my timeline of wrestling, to be honest, because the Cena AJ feud feels like it was like 2-3 years ago.
I totally agree with you, Rhys. And the thing is that for me, I really do see a pre-COVID WWE and a post-COVID WWE. There's a big difference in them to me, and that's something that I'm going to come on to in our wrestling importance. But you are right. To me, 7 years ago feels like AJ Styles in TNA.
Yeah, 100%.
With his phenomenal entrance music, which blows his WWE stuff out of the water. I love AJ Styles, but his TNA entrance is so much better than his WWE entrance.
Mm-hmm. AJ
Ready to
Styles will probably be one of my favorite wrestlers.
Sorry.
But like you said, it's so surreal. Like his ROH and like New Japan run doesn't feel long at all. Like it feels like it was like 6 months.
AJ also broke the mold. If you know this, Rhys, AJ broke the mold to be the first TNA original to go to WWE.
Yep, set the path for people like Bobby Roode, James Storm, in a
briefly
small degree. Yeah, Gunner, if anyone remembers Gunner from TNA.
I think Dixie Carter remembers Gunner quite well.
Shame Gunner's a bit of a MAGA Fruit Loop, but that's okay.
I mean, people forget.
We just alienated half our audience.
You could say Samoa Joe, but people forget Samoa Joe actually isn't a TNA original, although it was there almost at the start.
Yeah, he was very much a Spike TV-esque person. But yeah, I would say he's more of an ROH original.
Definitely. Do you know what? I have to be absolutely honest with you and the listeners. I've not watched much of Jim Cornette's ROH, the original ROH. I need to have a look at it. And question for you, Rhys, where is the library for ROH? I'm sure that's now probably owned by Tony Khan, isn't it?
I'm not sure, because I don't know if I've misread something somewhere or made this up, but at one point, is it RF Video, Rob Feinstein, whatever his name was?
Okay.
I think he was in charge of the ROH tape library, which is where you got like a lot of those like best of Samoa Joe and best of CM Punk and best of Nigel McGuinness like ROH style DVDs. I don't belong on Honor Club, so I don't know if they're on there, but I think.
Okay, I'm just reading now, actually. Tony Khan Library. Tony Khan. Right, let's have a look. I'm reading an article by CM Punk, who's taking a dig at Peacock about it. Of course. Basically, that's what he wanted, really. He bought Ring of Honor for the library, didn't he? And then he just bought the extras on top of it. But he did actually outbid WWE, interestingly.
Which is crazy.
Not when you think
At the same time, I can't imagine they actually put too much money into ROH.
It was a bid, but it wasn't. I think I haven't got the figure here, but I seem to remember off the top of my head, he only paid like $7 million for ROH, which is almost the same amount of money that Vince paid for WCW, isn't it?
I'm just reading something here. Apparently, the tape library that Khan owns only has footage from 2012 onwards.
Okay.
Who owns?
Interesting. Because I know. In terms of ownership, they changed hands more than once, didn't they? ROH.
Like Impact, they just go through ownership like nothing.
No. Anyway, we are digressing off our agreed subject.
We are. We completely skipped over our topic here.
Yes. So, what we're going to do, ladies and gentlemen, is we're going to go one at a time, and we're going to start off with Mick Foley himself, Rhys.
Okay. My number one for the importance to the wrestling business is Hulk Hogan. Now, I don't like Hulk Hogan. I think he's very bland. He's one of those people that has like this aura about him that you kind of can't help getting excited when you see him. But I don't like him, and I don't know why, because... And not that I don't know why I don't like him. I don't like him, and I don't know why. He gives me that little bit of excitement. I don't know if it's like nostalgia or something, but... Can you name a good Hulk Hogan match? Or can you name iconic Hulk Hogan moments?
I think I can name quite a few. From my own personal experience, Hulk Hogan coming to the ring to save Eugene from Muhammad Hassan, and that pop he got, if you remember that. Also, I mean, you can't... The Rock Hogan. When I'm thinking about... So, for me, Hulk Hogan, it might be a little different to you, Rhys, because of my age. I am very much NWO Hulk Hogan, and that's how I remember him. You know, spray painting the belt. You know, playing the guitar with the belt, being a complete jackass. So for me, I don't have "Eat Your Vitamins" Hulk Hogan in my dickhead Hogan. That doesn't work for me, brother. Creative control.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. So, again, is it the fact that we remember Hogan for the big moments and that sort of stuff, or is it because of good matches? Because in my opinion, all his, quote-unquote good matches aren't good. Rock Hogan, in my opinion, isn't a good match. It's a good moment in wrestling. Shawn Michaels' Hulk Hogan match isn't a good match, but it's infamous for what happened.
It's actually quite funny, that match.
Yeah.
There was supposed to be a whole program, wasn't there? And Hogan refused to do anything else with him.
Yep. Hogan refused to return the favour, so Michaels went out there and did what Michaels does best.
A favour, did he? I mean, in fact, I feel like going back to watching. I'm back to watching that, actually.
But at the same time, you can't disregard how polarising Hogan was to the wrestling industry and how Hogan helped bring it into the mainstream, because collectively at the time of like the late 80s, probably late 80s, not only did kids love him, but like you see the grown-ups in the audience are digging Hulk Hogan. Like he's this almost like larger than life entity within the business. And you can say what you want about Vince being like the harbinger of that, or like him having opponents like Andre and whatnot. But it all manifests down into Hogan.
About that amazing moment where he body slams the 700-pound Andre the Giant, and he tore all the muscles in his back. Yeah. Actually, a rubbish match. It's terrible. The whole match is just
look at Warrior Hogan. Huge match in wrestling history.
Yeah.
Terrible though. Like, absolutely terrible. So, yeah, I think Hogan's on there for. He is on my Mount Rushmore of wrestling importance because of what he did for the business. Because Hogan has one of these people. Look at the NWO. He took WCW at the time into the mainstream, in my opinion. Like, they were doing okay. Hogan as that guy, I think, is what really gave them that pump and that push. And when someone's been top of a company everywhere they've been, no matter how bad they are in the ring, there has to be something about them. You know, Hulk Hogan outside of wrestling, I think, is a piece of shit.
Difference between was it Hulk Hogan's penis or Terry Bologna's? Sorry. Right. So I have a question.
Let's just put his dick on the Mount Rushmore.
Yeah. Do you think Hulk Hogan impact on the wrestling world than John Cena did?
Yes. But I think Hogan had a better all-round, like, influence on the... No, I agree. I think they would as well. I think Cena had all the tools and the ability and everything to have a larger impact on the business than Hogan. But I think them keeping Cena as a good guy for his entire career once he turned face
They did that to
limited
Hogan,
what he
didn't
could
they?
do.
He had to
They
move
kept him
to a
face,
different.
yep.
He had to move to the different country company. I'm trying to find whether Hogan's had a 5-star match. By the way, sorry, Rhys. I'm trying to find whether Hogan's had a 5-star match. The problem is that his career started in 1979 and he wrestled his last match 2 years ago.
While we're doing this, let's see what Cage Match rates as like his highest rated matches.
Who's?
A Cage Match, that like online database of wrestling where people can rate things.
Okay, I'm on Wikipedia. I'm looking through. Here we go. Here we go. All 5-star matches by Meltzer. Here we go. Let's have a look.
Mm-hmm.
80s. It'll be 80s, won't it, Hogan? Hogan in the 80s was actually a very different power.
According to Cage Match, his highest rated match is the 1992 Royal Rumble. That tells you everything you need to know.
He hasn't got a single 5-star match.
Nope.
I mean, Tully Blanchard had 3.
Hogan versus Flair, WCW, is the highest rated Meltzer match with 4.25 stars.
Meltzer only gave the Rock Hogan match a 3-star, didn't he?
Yep.
He said, you know, he got quite defensive over it. He said, looking back on it, he'd do the same because it wasn't a good match. It was a good crowd. If you turn the crowd off, the match is terrible.
Yep. Crowd can really make or break a match. We saw that Money in the Bank.
I mean, John Cena's got a 5-star match.
Does he? Does he? Oh, the Punk one, yeah.
Yes.
His match with AJ at the Rumble was 5 stars. I don't know how it didn't get 5 stars.
It's because it's WWE.
Yeah.
Keith Lee's got a 5-star match.
Keith Lee versus Divakovic in PWG.
Yeah. But how many 5-star matches does Kenny Omega have? Jesus Christ. Okay, if you go past 2019, every 5-star match either has fuck off, has John Moxley got a 5-star match. Sorry. You can edit some of this out, Rhys. I'm just having a look.
Go for it.
Sorry. Will Ospreay, mate. He's got more than Kenny Omega.
Will Ospreay's got like 26, hasn't he?
Young Bucks can fuck right off. Jericho Appreciation Society has a 5-star match.
Really?
Yeah. The Jericho Appreciation Society versus the Blackpool Combat Club.
Oh, is that the bloody Stadium Stampede or the
Double or Nothing night of 2022.
Oh, the weird like arena brawls that they do.
Right, yeah. Gunther versus Drew McIntyre versus Sheamus.
Was that a 5-star match?
Yep. So was Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn versus the Usos.
Well, damn.
They're the only two that. Let's have a look. Gunther versus Sheamus has got 2 5-star matches. They were really good together, actually. Those two.
Well, yeah.
WWE only has like 7 going back 20 years. In fact,
Which is nuts.
the last 3 5-star. What the fuck is a 5.25? The last 3 WWE 5-star matches have had Gunther in or Water.
The more you know.
Right. Anyway, so we'll just edit all that shit out and we'll go back. Right. So, so Hulk Hogan. So it's difficult because I would have, it's difficult because I kind of agree where you're coming from, but I also disagree because I think his importance to wrestling has diminished an awful lot because of his personal life and his said demeanor. So if you think about it, how has Hogan really been relevant and important since 2000?
No, I agree with that. My only argument to that is, for someone that has done what he's done outside of the company, for him to, whenever he makes an appearance, to get that massive pop and roar,
So you're kind
I think sadly shows that his stardom is above anything he can really do, which I think...
So in some aspect, I know in some aspect you're saying that Hogan, no Cena, because he's kind of a
Yeah,
copy in some ways. He's a better version, in my opinion. He's a far better. I can't believe I'm going to say this. I think Cena's a better wrestler than Hogan. That's saying something. And
yeah, I agree.
but they kind of must. I think they based the character on him, didn't they? In some ways, on the WWE version of him, anyway.
Oh, must have done.
Yeah. So right. Anything else to say on that?
No, let's talk about Hogan the better, to be honest.
Right, well, mine. So I'm going to go with an easy one on my list. I'm going with Jeffrey Jarrett. Jeff Jarrett. Now, Rhys was unkind and wouldn't let me put Jeff and Jerry Jarrett together as one. But
may I interject here for 1 second? Jeff Jarrett is number 2 on my list, so you can do 2 birds, 1 stone here.
Okay, so Jeff Jarrett, I think there was no disagreement here with Jeff Jarrett. So I will say my 2 cents and then Rhys will. So taking away, which I'll talk about in a bit with Rhys, taking away his wrestling catalogue, Jeff Jarrett decided, after being fired live on TV, to set up a wrestling company in early 2002. Now, at this point, there was no competition for WWF at the time. NWA didn't exist. Nada. It was a name on a paper. NWA didn't exist. WCW had gone. No one in America knew what New Japan Wrestling was, and he set up what was then known as Total TNA Wrestling. I was about to call it Total Annihilation Wrestling. That's not right. TNA Wrestling. TNA Wrestling basically gave a home to everybody that didn't want to be part of Vince McMahon's caravan. And it is really important to remember how big an impact that's had on the wrestling industry. Jeff and his father, Jerry, setting up that small independent promotion that went on to be TNA/Impact saved wrestling, in my opinion, because whatever you say about Impact in the early to mid 2000s was pulling in 2 million views, 1.5 million views. People like Christian Cage, Booker T, Kurt Angle, they all went there. And they also produced people like AJ Styles, the Motor City Machine Guns, rejuvenated AJ, rejuvenated CM Punk, rejuvenated Samoa Joe. So it's such an important, forgotten piece of wrestling history. Go.
No, to be honest, you've nailed everything I was going to say. Like, he gave a canvas to people that wouldn't or couldn't like make Vince's cut per se, or didn't want to be lumbered into the. If you're a small dude, you're in the cruiserweight division, like Rey Mysterio and whatnot.
I mean, the X Division was
basically gave these
revolutionary.
people a hope.
The X Division was amazing. I mean,
Yeah.
The X Division, WWE. I remember people from WWE wishing they had that. I mean, they didn't have anything like that at this time. They still don't really today.
No, Jeff basically took the like light heavyweights from WCW and then luchadors and whatever that people loved and was like, you know what? They're our forefront. There you go.
I think it's also important to point out that he also gave jobs to people, ex-WWE officials like Jim Cornette, my personal favourite, Dutch Mantell, Bruce Pritchard. They all worked for him, and they all cut their teeth and came out of it better, in my opinion. I mean, Bruce Pritchard now is basically running WWE creative under, depending on the day of the week, Triple H or Vince McMahon. And also, there were mistakes. I mean, if you look who we put in charge of his content at first, it didn't help.
When you look at early TNA, the 2 years where it started, yes, they had Jarrett and they had Sting and they had Shamrock for a little bit.
Never had Sting.
Other than
They
that,
never had Sting.
Sting came in 2004, didn't he?
He came in as part of the Cross the Line promo. He came in just around about the same time as Christian.
I thought he was in TNA before that because he feuded with Jarrett for the title but never won it.
I might be wrong. He may have come and gone away for a little bit. I started watching TNA religiously around 05, 06.
Yeah, he started in 2003. He was never full time during this point.
Okay.
The cross the line stuff was when he was proper full time. And the 2 years where they first set up, other than Jarrett, Sting, and Ken Shamrock for a little bit, they didn't really have, as far as I can think, a mainstream, well-known wrestler.
What are you talking about? K Quick.
Yeah, good old K Quick.
Ron Killings was one of their first world champions.
He was. Unfortunately, in WWE, he was in a tag team with Road Dogg that went nowhere. But that's my point.
Everybody, you need to go up and look at their rap. It's fucking hilarious. It's on YouTube.
So
it's hilarious.
And the fact that he did that with TNA with a bunch of unwanted people or quote unquote small dudes and local guys, I think shows a testament to how good Jeff is. And granted, yes, he had a reign of terror with the title, but at the same time, whereas with Triple H you were kind of sick of seeing him on TV, with Jarrett having that title, I was more looking forward to seeing him being beaten, if that makes sense.
He played a very good coward champion, but also you've got to remember that he actually stood back. Names started coming in and didn't hog the limelight. When they started signing people like Christian Cage and Kurt Angles and Samoa Joes, the Stings, the Kevin Nashes, he took a step back from that. And people used to joke about his ego because I think he won the NWA title 5 times in 3 minutes or something.
That's disgusting.
But if you've got to think about it, when the company launched, he was the selling point.
Yeah,
Jeff Jarrett. And people also have got to remember that his dad, Jerry Jarrett, at one point was actually offered the second highest position in WWE by Vince McMahon. He was a very, very, very well respected wrestling promoter.
Wasn't he also in the line to take over the company if Vince went under for the steroid trial?
Absolutely, yep. He was going to be the chairman if Vince went under.
So that tells you everything you know. And Jarrett is one of the only people that can hold up Vince for money to get a match on the card.
300,000. And that firing on live TV was a shoot. It was not planned. It's come out from both of them.
I think the one thing that Jarrett should forever be remembered in wrestling history and wrestling importance is Global Force Wrestling.
The whole thing was weird. The whole setup was weird, and it lasted about 2 months.
It lasted about a year and a half. They just couldn't get anything. Did you hear about their TV show? Yeah. How they filmed Global Force Amped, whatever it was called. Yeah. And then Impact taped over the videotapes of the shows. Yeah.
It was a very weird time in wrestling. There was lots of people struggling to get Dixie Carter off of TNA.
Yep.
I won't fault them for selling to Panda Energy, and people forget actually that when they sold to Panda Energy quite quickly, but Dixie didn't become the female Vince McMahon for a good couple of years, did she? Because they had my best mate Jim Cornette as the authority figure for quite a while.
Yeah.
That's when I loved TNA, but on Jeff Jarrett himself, I mean, he to promote Impact, he allowed one big thing he did was he allowed his wrestlers to go to other companies, and that's something that WWE and even WCW in the days they were big didn't allow to do.
Yeah, no, 100%. I could not agree more. I mean, I don't have anything else to add for Jeff Jarrett. I think you summed up all of my thoughts like perfectly. He was a harbinger for wrestlers to go elsewhere, and honestly, in my opinion, develop further. And the amount of sort of homegrown talent that grew, insane.
Yeah, no. Anyway, it's number 3 on your list.
Well, would you like to do number 2 on your list? Because you only named one of them. So, because my number 2 is the same anyway.
Okay, so I am going to go for Paul Levesque. I think Paul Levesque, his work in WWE, especially with NXT, to an extent, you can say everything you said about Jeff Jarrett about to Paul Levesque in a modern way to a lesser extent. Because you got to remember that NXT, when it was first launched, was basically a revamped Tough Enough, wasn't it, Rhys?
Essentially, and then you had the awful TV show aspect where they'd put them on the spot, and it was hard to watch.
So, for a good couple of years, Papa H was left to run NXT as he wanted by Vince, from what I can gather. Vince basically never got involved with the creative of NXT, and the only thing that he'd get involved with was the call-ups. And NXT TakeOver, when they first started, were fantastic. NXT, I remember watching NXT Brooklyn, and where he used to open the show with the spotlight on him, and pardon me, the creative in NXT was amazing. Again, it was the ability for smaller, lesser known wrestlers to have a chance that would not get on the crowded WWE roster. I'm going to give you an example, yeah? If it wasn't for Triple H and NXT, Shield wouldn't have happened. All 3 members of the Shield wouldn't have happened. Iggy Langston wouldn't have happened. So the New Day wouldn't have happened, basically. Bo Dallas, your favourite wrestler, wouldn't have happened. Charlotte Flair probably would have been big anyway, but she came through NXT. The 4 Horsemen. I can just go on and on and on. The entire main top end of the roster now has come through Triple H's NXT, which is really important if you think about modern day WWE, because where does the loyalty lie now with the wrestlers? Where does the loyalty really lie? Every single main event wrestler right now has come through NXT. Correct me if I'm wrong, the Usos started in NXT, didn't they?
They started in Florida Championship Wrestling, so just before NXT.
Okay, my bad.
To put what you're saying into perspective, I am looking at the Money in the Bank 2023 match card.
Yep.
So, are you ready?
Yep.
Damian Priest, NXT. Pete Dunne, NXT. LA Knight, NXT. Ricochet. Yeah, I mean, he was in NXT for a little bit, but I would mainly say Impact as well.
Yeah, go on, man.
Ricochet was NXT. Nakamura, NXT. Liv Morgan, Raquel Rodriguez, NXT. Shayna Baszler, NXT. Matt Riddle, NXT. Gunther, NXT UK, and a little bit of NXT. Io Sky, Bayley, Becky Lynch, Selena Vega, Zoe Stark, Seth Rollins, Finn Balor, Solo Sikoa is, I guess, NXT 2.0, so doesn't really count. That's a good 70% of that card is...
Did you say my favourite wrestler, Ronda Rousey?
She didn't...
I'm joking, not Ronda Rousey. I know, she didn't...
She should have gone to NXT.
I know. Well, I mean... Ami came through NXT UK, by the way.
Which one?
Ami. Rhea Ripley's NXT UK.
She did a couple of matches in normal NXT, didn't she?
No. She went NXT UK. She went from the bottom, basically. She was NXT UK to NXT to the main roster. So she did all of it.
Yeah, I mean, same with Gunther, people like that.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to hear something funny, she was actually trained by Scotty 2 Hotty.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Scotty 2 Hotty was her main trainer, who she credits as getting her ready for wrestling.
The more you know.
I mean, I'm glad that she's better. She's better wrestler than Scotty 2 Hotty. But yeah, no. See, my whole point on Paul Levesque, and I also think when he's left to write the show, the internet wrestling community, love them or hate them, never 90% have a bad word to say about the show. It's fresh. His writing is fresh. It's got rid of all the silly stuff. You know, there's more wrestling on Triple H's wrestles in shows, if you follow me. There's none of the 20-minute opening monologues he was made to do.
No, I totally agree, and I honestly think that Triple H is a very, very solid choice for a Mount Rushmore of importance to the wrestling business.
If I'm going to be honest with you, he didn't make my Mount Rushmore of wrestlers, but he could have. The only reason the only reason I didn't put him on there was because he's on this one.
No, that's fair enough. That's fair enough.
Okay.
I don't think you can be forward with that.
Okay, and who's next on your list?
Okay. My number 3 is Stone Cold Steve Austin. Now, Stone Cold is a wrestler who I'm not going to say I've never quite, resonated with. Like, he's got a lot of great matches. But I was always a Shawn Michaels and Triple H fan during, Austin's era, if that makes sense. But without Austin, I don't think it matters how good the Undertaker and Kane storyline is. I don't think it matters how good DX are and the Nation of Domination, any of that. I think without Stone Cold being him and just the way he oozes charisma and was basically just like an amped up, jacked version of himself, I don't think that Vince beats WCW, no matter how bad WCW gets.
I agree. I think there are 3 reasons why WWF won the Monday Night War. Vince McMahon and Stone Cold's storyline. That's one reason.
Mm-hmm.
I also think the explosion of a young Rock is reason 2. And reason 3 is Eric Bischoff not being allowed to do what Eric Bischoff was good at by the WCW owners. So I agree with you.
No, I agree.
Question, I need to ask you a question. Have you ever seen a younger Stone Cold wrestle before he got hurt?
Yes, and he is a technical master.
Because a lot of people remember Stump a Mud Pie Austin, Stunner and Go Home. Yep. Before he got hurt with his knees and his neck, he was an incredibly good wrestler.
Mm-hmm. Good old Stunning Steve. His series with Dragon, Ricky Steamboat.
So this ties back into your Hogan thing. So Hogan's era was a lot longer than the Stone Cold era, but Stone Cold, in the space of, I'd say, 96 to 2000, that 4 years will never ever be beaten in the impact of wrestling history. The guy is still their top, not, I don't think so now, but the guy's still in their top 5 merch sellers, and he retired 20 years ago.
Yeah, and I mean, all that culminated with him and Rock at probably the greatest wrestling event ever, WrestleMania. Yeah. Like WrestleMania, what would it be, 2001? 17, that's it. WrestleMania 17.
The one where there isn't a single bad match on the card.
Exactly. There's not one.
Is that Rock Austin 2, is it?
Okay. Yes, because number 1 was 99 and
number 3 is...
3 was the retirement one.
Which is a good match himself, but that one was... one. This is the one where Vince turns on the Rock and hits him with the chair.
Yeah. And Austin turns heel.
I loved a hit. You know what, people said heel Austin was a mistake, but he was really, really funny as a heel.
He was so good. The whole Austin Kurt Angle thing with the little hats and the cowboy singing, Austin during the invasion is just hilarious.
Oh, that whole thing where he comes down with a pool cue and just destroys it makes WCW look weak, but Jesus Christ. The importance of Stone Cold Steve Austin will never be forgotten in wrestling, and the fact the guy retired 20 years ago from mainstream wrestling and he managed to come out in WrestleMania 2 years ago or last year against Kevin Owens and still put on a show. There was an interview he did recently where he said he hadn't actually even trained for the match. But Kevin Owens was amazed on how well he was still going.
Yeah, I think Austin has to be on my Mount Rushmore of importance to the wrestling business.
I don't think anyone could ever argue that Austin's place on any wrestling top 5 or top 4 list is there. The guy saved WWE. The guy was paid, I think Vince paid him $10.5 million 1 year in merch sales alone, I read, which was crazy money, especially in the mid-90s, you know? Oh, and like, think of the storylines he was being involved in. You had him versus the Taker, First Blood. You had him versus the whole McMahon family, you know, with the bang and Vince pisses his pants. You had him and The Rock. Some of the matches they did were amazing. He had a promo with Shawn Michaels. My favourite Austin moment is the Royal Rumble where Bret Hart's music hits and he's sat on the turnbuckle and he just puts his head on the hands and screams. Because that match between him and Bret is very underrated. Well, it's not underrated. It's very forgotten because it's a weird match because Austin comes in as the heel and leaves as the face, and that doesn't often happen.
Yeah, not only is it probably the best double turn in the history of wrestling, the match itself, everyone remembers that moment. They remember, you know, Austin bleeding while in the sharpshooter and passing out. But the match itself is quality.
Absolutely. Let me see if Uncle Meltzer
and a lot of like matches where you remember the endings.
Uncle Meltzer gave it a 5-star while we're talking. Is that 96-ish?
Yes.
Okay. Brett versus Owen SummerSlam. Okay. Yep. Gave it a 5-star. WrestleMania 13.
Yeah. I'm not surprised. It's a great match. It's a great match.
Yeah, I mean, I could talk to you about Stone Cold Steve Austin all night, and you know, him and Mike Tyson. I mean, come on, I know it's a work, yeah, but Mike Tyson in 97, 96 was off the rails. He'd come out of prison for a serious crime. You know, this is before Mike Tyson calmed down and became a TikTok meme. You know, and he had the balls to get in there with him and actually shove him around.
And the fact that the crowd want to see who will win out of Austin and Tyson tells you everything you need to know about how well Austin has got this character laid out.
I'm going to give you an example, yeah? This is the power of Austin, yeah? Mm-hmm. Right. Buy rate for WrestleMania 13, yeah? 237,000. Buy rate for WrestleMania 14, Austin Michaels was 730,000 in North America alone. The buy rate for 19, 800,000. The main event. Buy rate for 20, 824,000. That's how big the Attitude Era was. Can you imagine them getting a buy rate of 824,000 now?
Yeah, it was
AEW's best buy rate, like 200,000-300,000.
I wouldn't have a clue. Yeah, it must be something like that.
Anything further to say on Austin?
No, I think Austin kind of speaks. He's one of those people where I think it speaks for himself.
You can't really argue.
Like, yeah, you don't really need to say much about Austin. You can just be like, Austin's on your Mount Rushmore, and people are like, yeah.
Best buy rate for AEW all out 215,000.
Yeah, there you go.
Not a bad buy rate. They're averaging about 140 at the moment. Bad. Right, so for me, I've got to look at my list now. I wrote it about an hour and a half ago. Okay, so for me, I am going with Eric Bischoff.
Okay.
I can tell for you there was a pause there.
No, it lagged.
Eric Bischoff for resurrecting WCW Crockett Promotions, turning it into the mainstream style wrestling we're used to today, introducing Nitro, which is the forerunner to what Raw, SmackDown, Revolution, Raw, SmackDown, Collision is all based on. Okay, making it so WWF had to turn to people like Stone Cold and The Rock. Okay, so it had to change and innovate, producing some of the best wrestling quality in the world that's ever been seen, Also, his work in general as general manager in WWE. I know that was the scripted role, but that is his acting.
Yep.
What is your view on Eric Bischoff?
I think Bischoff was a huge role in WCW becoming more mainstream and kicking wrestling into the
Also, I
forefront.
just wanted to
think
add
without
one thing. I
Bischoff,
do apologise. Before Eric Bischoff CW in '92 as basically a backstage producer, and within 3 years was head of the company.
it's crazy.
And during his first run, he had control over everything.
Yeah, which is insane. I think without Bischoff and his vision for what could be and his checkbook, shall we say, I don't think wrestling would have been as mainstream as it was because it was kind of floundering. Let's be fair, between 92 and 95 wasn't really huge.
No, wrestling was in the doldrums completely. Before Nitro, before Nitro became the machine it was, WWE and WCW were a very family-friendly orientated business. And one of the reasons why WCW actually floundered again in the end in the late '99 was because Turner Warner had insisted that they went back to family friendly. So
Yep.
his innovation saved wrestling, and he fired Stone Cold via fax. Fired him via fax.
Which is nuts.
And I know Paul Heyman likes to take credit for Steve Austin, but he actually cut his teeth in WCW, as well as the Undertaker, Kane. They all came through. Bischoff got rid of them all. Either makes him a great businessman or a shit one.
It's really funny because originally Austin, before he went to WCW, was in USWA alongside Jeff Jarrett, of all people.
He's known Jeff Jarrett for years. They talk very fondly about each other. They've got another.
Yeah. Which I think says a lot about sort of like that period in wrestling.
Oh, people forget that Bischoff was around for a good 10 years before he went to WCW. People knew of him.
Oh, yeah.
And I do believe he was at AWA or something, AWAUC or something at one point. If you know which one I mean.
Yes, God, it eludes me now,
Territory
but I do know
days.
what
That
you
should
mean
be
about.
a good
Yeah.
talk one day. Well, I mean,
I would love to talk about territories.
my view on it is that again, I'm going to say something controversial. Vince McMahon is not on my list because and the next person on my list will correspond to this, because however good you think WWF has been, everything that Vince has been great at has been copied from other people. Vince was very happily doing the stupid dances with the roulette girls, very happy having Diesel as his lowest grossing world champion, very happy having Doink the Clown versus whatever that thing came out of the egg was, the gobbledygook, on his show. But if it wasn't for Bischoff, wrestling would have failed in the '90s. It really would have. And he copied. Raw is War is a copy of Monday Night Nitro.
Yep, 100%.
Absolutely, 100% a copy. He just had Vince is a good businessman, and Turner had other things to do. As we think about it.
Yep.
Anything you want to say on Bischoff?
No, I think Bischoff's one of those people where people that know wrestling, I don't really think can make an argument against it. He might not be on everyone's because other people might value things more, but I don't think he's the kind of person where you can tell someone that he shouldn't be on a Mount Rushmore, if that makes sense.
If you look back at the 83 weeks that they won the Monday Night War, actually that they won it a few more than 83 weeks, but 83 weeks was the consecutive time. It actually deserved to win it.
Yeah, no, 100%.
Towards the end, when Raw started taking over, it didn't mean Nitro was bad. It just meant the competition was there. And look what happened to WCW when they took it off him.
Mm-hmm.
Who did they hire?
They hired Vince Russo and Ed Ferrara.
Yes. And how long did it take for them to ask for Bischoff to come back and supervise?
Oh man, when Ed Ferrara started pretending to be Bowles Palsy JR called Oklahoma, feuding for the cruiserweight title, I think that's when.
It took less than 2 months for him to get a phone call. And you know what the funny thing is, according to his 83 Weeks podcast, they had to pay him off his other contract and still pay him a new one.
So you want about Bischoff? He's a smart businessman.
You've got to love American contracts.
Right.
They paid him off. They paid him a 5 year. They paid him something like 5 years worth of contract off, and then had to still pay him off when he signed a new contract. And they got rid of him again and did the same thing again.
It's just a scary situation.
It
Absolutely
is
scary situation.
It is. And I'm forgetting about. Honestly, have you heard him talk about TNA and how he didn't have any control behind the scenes and he had nothing to do with anything? He was just there to be Hogan's mate.
Yeah.
What do you think about that? Really?
I think that shows a lack of intelligence, a sense of self-worth.
Yep.
And not bigotry, but maybe what's kind of like a wool over the eyes approach of star power.
Do you think he actually had any creative control?
I think he was probably a advisor that they could listen to.
From what I could gather, anything involving Hogan had to go through him.
Yeah.
Because people might not know this. Those two, Hogan, basically Eric Bischoff is his carer in some ways.
Yeah, Bischoff has like all his money and all sorts, doesn't
he? Well, the story is that he was when he was going through his divorce, Hogan handed over everything to Bischoff's name.
Yep.
So his wife couldn't take everything from him. His wife was going to take him for everything. Everything got transferred over to Bischoff's name. So temporarily, he actually owned the name Hulk Hogan.
Which is mental.
Definitely. Right, so moving on. Who's next on your list? I've got one more.
Yeah, one more. Now, this was the one I said to you as a surprise one.
Okay.
So do you want me to do it now, or do you want to save it for the end?
What's your turn?
Okay. My one.
Marty Jannetty.
No. But might not be too far off. Tom Pritchard.
Sorry?
Tom Pritchard.
Tom Pritchard.
Good old brother to Bruce. A lot of people on the surface will know Tom Pritchard as a trainer and the dude who used to be in random tag teams like the Body Donners with Chris Candido and whatnot.
Okay.
But Tom Pritchard is solely responsible for training nearly every top level wrestler you know to this day. To go over a few names. Tom Pritchard trained Vince McMahon for his matches. He trained Shane McMahon for his matches. He trained Dolph Ziggler. He trained the Bella Twins. He trained Mark Henry. He trained Natalia. He trained Randy Orton. He trained Kurt Angle. He trained The Rock. He trained Brock Lesnar. He was in that OVW class, so he had a hands-on with Kurt Angle and Shelton Benjamin. I don't think you will find anyone as good at training wrestlers, as well as still wrestling themselves, as Tom Pritchard.
But I'm now looking him up, and he also trained someone called Cheeseburger.
Yep, from Ring of Honor and New Japan Pro Wrestling.
Yep, I know about him. Brackus,
yep.
I know about him. Okay, so I knew of him. If I'm honest with you, I did not realise how important he was. Randy Orton, yeah, wow. The Rock, Kurt Angle, Val Venus. And we can forgive him for the Bella Twins. Dolph Ziggler, who is, in my opinion, is one of the most underrated wrestlers of his generation. Everything. Yeah, I mean, God. He started in 1979.
Mm-hmm.
Went through them all.
If he wasn't training with them, he was tagging with people such as a young Chris Candido, etc. Like, I don't think there's anyone else I can think of.
Did you mention Mark Henry?
Yeah, he was on my list.
Okay.
I don't think there's anyone else you can think of that has trained with
He
people or
also
tagged
was
with
the
people.
Blue Blazer at one point.
Mm-hmm. He was also in Camp Cornette, so he was with Owen Hart, the British Bulldog, Vega, all that sort of stuff. Like, yeah, I don't think you'll find anyone that's had more hands-on approach of the wrestlers that we've come to see on our screen for so long than Tom Pritchard. I think he's probably a unsung hero of wrestling.
Yeah, no, probably is. I mean, he's one of those quiet heroes that everybody in the wrestling business would go, Thomas Pritchard. Oh, wow, he's amazing. But people who aren't in the know would be like, do you mean Bruce? As in Bruce Pritchard, who again is very important in wrestling. Oh, wow. I mean, I didn't know much about him. I mean, obviously I knew a lot of Sheik. Okay. Wow. Okay.
And,
Yeah, wow. I
the
didn't know
people he's trained, Dolph Ziggler, he's been at the top of the card, or he's been having, like, insane mid-card matches.
Once I looked at this and it said The Rock, Randy Orton, Mark Henry, Kurt Angle, I mean...
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I mean, I don't think Kurt Angle needed much training, but he probably... Well, saying that, there is a huge difference between amateur and pro wrestling, a huge difference.
Yes.
Oh, wow. So, I've got a problem for my number 4.
Okay.
I've written out 2 people, and I've got a really hard time here. And I've written out reasons for those 2 people, and I think you know who they are.
Well, would you like... I'm pretty sure I know which one of them is. I'm going to list both, and then at the end, I'll make you choose your 4th.
Okay. I've got Paul Heyman.
Yep.
Jim Cornette.
Yeah, I knew Jim Cornette was going to be one.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen of the listeners, I have a bit of a thing for Jim Cornette. I'm a member of the cult of Cornette. But I'll start with Jim Cornette. Okay, right. So, he is a large part of why Ring of Honor was so big.
Mm-hmm.
OVW was so big. He was a co-owner of OVW. And during his time at OVW is the time where Batista came through, Cena came through, Shelton Benjamin came through, Orton came through, Ring of Honor.
Tom Pritchard helped train them.
Tom Pritchard, all right. Okay. Also, his Ring of Honor days, he was responsible for when it was the Ring of Honor with people like CM Punk, people like Apollo Crews, people like Samoa Joe, and I think AJ Styles was in Ring of Honor very briefly as well at one point.
Yeah, AJ's been in Ring of Honor a lot throughout his career. I think he's done like 3 or 4 short stints there.
Also, Jim Cornette has a lot to do with The Undertaker in The Undertaker's early careers. He was the person who wrote the Hell in the Cell, from the best of my knowledge, where Kane ripped off the cell. He was a WWF executive who was the worst enemy of Bucktooth, if you know who I mean.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, his impressions, I don't know if you've ever heard them, are hilarious.
I have.
If you take him back earlier in his career, he was Yokozuna's manager.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I know.
Further back in his career with his tennis racket, who was he manager of?
Oh, I want to say the New Heavenly Bodies, but it wasn't, was it?
Sorry?
I want to say the New Heavenly Bodies, but it's not them. It's just because I just read their name. Midnight Express.
Oh, mate, honestly, he was the manager of the Rock and Roll Express, mate.
Was it the Rock? I thought it was the Midnight Express.
It may have been the Midnight Express. I might have to cut that out. Shit. Yes, Jim Cornette, Midnight Express.
There we go.
So, Jim Cornette has been in the wrestling industry since 1980. Look how long that is. Yeah? He started at the same time as Vince McMahon, and I'm going to list you some of his achievements. Okay, awards and accomplishment, okay? Right. Best Booker, 93, 2001, 2003. 2001 and 2003 were his Ring of Honor booking, I believe. Best non-wrestler, 2006, his TNA on-screen character. Best on interviews, 85, 86, 87, 88, 93. Manager of the Year. 84, 85, 86, 87, 88, 89, 90, 92, 93, 94, 95, 96. That's a lot, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Pro Wrestling Illustrated of the Year Manager 85, 93, 95. So, Jim Cornette's feud also with Vince Russo is worth a listen. It's absolutely hilarious and they should make a film about it. Russo actually fired a restraining order against him and he then photocopied it, autographed it, and started selling it on his YouTube shop.
Oh, really?
He really did. Jim Cornette is also well known for his commentary. He's also well known for his ownership of Smoky Mountain Wrestling between 91 and 94. Smoky Valley Wrestling is where Kane came from. Between 1999 and 2005, he was co-owner of Ohio Valley Wrestling. So, that's where all those wrestlers came from. He's also worked for Continental Wrestling Association, Mid-South Wrestling Association, World Class Wrestling Management, Jim Crockett, WWF, TNA, Ring of Honor. So he would definitely be on 100%. He'd be on a Mount Rushmore of wrestling managers from anybody
Easily.
that knows anything about wrestling going back to the 80s. Also, his YouTube channel is the highest wrestling YouTube channel with subscribers online. What's your view on Jim Cornette? Do you think he's actually a dinosaur to today's wrestling, or do you think he has valid points that people get upset about?
I'm in the middle. I think
That
Cornette
sigh
has a lot
is
of
actually a
valid points.
perfect Jim Cornette sight after watching a Young Bucks match.
No, I think Cornette has a lot of valid points. I think he knows a lot of what he's talking
You
about.
can't deny his wrestling knowledge, his
also-
catalogue of knowledge.
No, exactly. I also think he's a little too set in his ways and doesn't understand how wrestling's evolved over time.
See where you're coming from, but he does have good things to say about things. He's not said a bad word about Collision yet.
Yeah, I think Cornette at his core likes wrestling a certain way because it works, and I don't think that's a problem. I think there is more than one way to make wrestling work, though, if that makes sense. I don't think you could ever discredit Cornette and say he doesn't know what he's talking about, because he does. I just think he's not very flexible in what he accepts to be wrestling, if that makes sense.
He is a very interesting character because the wrestling world is quite split down the middle on him, and in terms of how they feel about him, AEW legend Jim Ross has defended him quite a lot actually, and just called him a Kentucky Fried Howard Stern. That he always has outspoken views, and that he's just on a bigger platform now. That's why he's getting the heat, but he's been like that since the 90s.
Yep.
Also, Tony Khan has on more than one time actually tried to hire him. That's public knowledge. Yep. Even after what he said, because Tony Khan is a student of wrestling, and I can imagine that Jim probably could make to a certain fan with Tony's input. Right. And also his need to listen to about him and Russo in early TNA, and how it had to be held together by Jeff Jarrett and I said his name earlier. Be the People. What was the manager's name? Dutch Mantel.
Oh, Dutch Mantel.
He literally they had to sit in the middle of him and Russo. Would you say?
Yep.
Do you know much about his feud with Russo?
Bits and pieces.
Would you say that he's right about Russo?
Yeah, I think Russo. I think for every one thing Russo has written that is good, there's probably 4 or 5 things that are absolute dog shit.
Bro,
exactly. And the problem is
his TNA stuff was dog crap, and the fact that they lost a TV deal because he emailed the wrong person.
Like,
So,
you could chalk up WCW to not being Russo's fault, in some weird way, I guess. But
things were already on the slide with the higher ups.
yeah, so like in some weird way, you could be like, oh, okay, maybe it wasn't Russo's fault. But when you look at Russo TNA and Russo WCW, they're so very similar, and they're both very fucking awful. It's hard to not be like it's Russo's fault. And the fact that
I'm just gonna.
he disregards the title belts, which I don't understand. Yes, it's fake fighting at its core, whatever you want to call it, blah blah blah, storytelling. But to call the belts props, I think just this diminishes like how you feel about wrestling to its core, if that makes sense.
I'm just going to read you a quote now from Tony Khan about Jim Cornette. Okay. Tony Khan has defended Jim Cornette's criticisms on his promotion, saying they are fair, and credits him with being a major influence on his booking career. Now, knowing Jim Cornette as I do, that probably made his eyes roll. FTR also were inspired by the Midnight Express, has defended Cornette's views on AEW, and says his critiques about the Young Bucks are correct. Right, so my next one is Paul E. Dangerously, better known as Twinkie Tits himself, Paul Heyman.
Yep.
Now, Paul Heyman is responsible for a seismic change in wrestling in the 90s that without this particular event, wrestling we watch today would not exist. Would you like me to elaborate, or do you totally understand?
I totally understand. I could not agree more.
Hardcore wrestling didn't actually start off as the ridiculous chainsaws in the ring.
Yep.
Let's just start that off, yeah? ECW, before we go into how many wrestlers it's responsible for, is responsible for the Crash TV style wrestling, which WWF Attitude Raw is War perfected. Thoughts?
And if you don't believe us, go and check our ECW reviews that we do weekly.
Which we need to do one of soon.
We do.
I've got a list of wrestlers that have come through ECW.
Oh, hit me with it.
Raven.
Yep.
Dudleys.
Mm-hmm.
Stone Cold very briefly.
Yep.
I've also got Kurt Angle getting disgusted and walking out after one match, and I'm only joking. I've also got people like RVD. I've got people like Taz. I've got... Well, it just goes on and on and on. I could go on for half an hour here. You know, there's so many wrestlers that came through and perfected their wrestling in ECW that went on to be a generation in WWE and beyond. And actually, you know, TNA, as we spoke about earlier, actually became the home for quite a few of these ex-ECW mid-carders, if you know, the early TNA, because Vince wouldn't hire them.
I mean, not in that. Look at ECW in its heyday.
ECW was actually ECW was actually getting the numbers on TV in its heyday as AEW is now. I know we're in a different world with ratings, but that just sums up to that they weren't a tiny, minuscule promotion.
Yeah, and ECW was consistently rated by WWE.
Consistently.
WCW.
They even had a working relationship at one point.
Yeah.
You know, I remember I remember the King coming across and getting his ass handed to him.
Yep. I mean, and WCW used to raid them. WCW took Sandman at one point, became Hack. They had Sabu. They took the Public Enemy for a little bit. They had Shane Douglas, Raven, Jericho, Benoit, Guerrero.
Also, another one that came through ECW who is often forgotten about is Chris Kanyon.
Yeah.
I actually rated Kanyon. I really did. Really, really did rate Kanyon. Benoit, as you said, and his beautiful but departed wife. came through there. You know, Sandman is me when I used to be able to drink if someone had handed me a kendo stick. Sabu is you before the bad knee. So, Mick Foley, Cactus Jack, didn't come through ECW, but was saved by ECW.
Yep.
Paul Heyman also managed The Undertaker in his early career. Was fired by Jim Ross in WCW in his early career. And also, if you just take away what he did as a promoter and an owner, some of his production and writing in the early 2000s in WWE was back when SmackDown was at its top, its peak. Back when Chris Benoit, Kurt Angle, Chris Jericho, Eddie Guerrero, The Undertaker, Rey Mysterio. I think he was writing it for a good solid year, and it was really, really good. This was back when Raw had its opening Triple H monologue that went on for half the show.
Yeah, the SmackDown 6 over
SmackDown
there.
6, and he introduced the world to Brock Lesnar. Brock Lesnar may have been trained by Jim Cornette's OVW, but if you think about Brock Lesnar, you do think about Paul Heyman in the same sentence. And they haven't been together for 3 years now, or 2 years now, but you still think about it. Again, Paul Heyman guy, he towards the end of CM Punk's his last 150, 200 days, he was with CM Punk. Paul Heyman has actually said that was his favourite thing he ever did in wrestling, because he used to just stand behind CM Punk and glare and didn't have to say anything, because you didn't need to work on the mic for Punk, did you? He did fail Ryback. He couldn't work with Ryback. They had that kiss, which was a bit weird. But he also, I don't think the bloodline would have got as far as it did without Paul Heyman today. Would you agree?
No, I think Heyman's been a key part of that entire
chief.
I think Heyman adds something to in terms of story, even in the matches like we saw.
I think Heyman's going to be the one that's going to betray and cost him the title. I think that would work well.
Yeah, so did it. I still think Heyman and Solo
did it with Lesnar, didn't he? He went to the Big Show.
Yeah, I'm telling you, Heyman and Solo, that is the way forward.
And also, people forget, he was really good on commentary. During the Invasion, it was a real fresh air, him on commentary. The two of them worked really well. And comment that I hear a lot about is they should have left Paul Heyman to do his bit on WWE, on Invasion, and not bring Stephanie in to run the ECW side. It was a big thing when they did the Invasion. Every McMahon had to do something, and they said, yeah, fine, Shane owns WCW, Vince owns WWF. Paul should have been left as that outsider invading. It ruined Invasion. Anyway, I think I know you're going to say however good Jim's background is and however many awards he's won. Paul's probably won just as many, if I'm honest. You're going to go with Paul Heyman, aren't you?
I would go for Paul Heyman. But I think they're so similar, in my opinion. It just comes down to longevity to me, and I think that's what gives it to Heyman.
Oh, I mean, Cornette's been around just as long. He started earlier.
Exactly, but now Cornette's out of the game in terms of commentating and stuff like that. Whereas Heyman's still going. I don't think Heyman's going to be leaving anytime soon.
So I think started in '84. Well, yeah, there's 4 years difference. Let's have a look. Awards and accomplishments. Oh, what? Fuck me, he's won so much. Paul Heyman. Right, best colour commentator, 91. Best booker, forever. Best non-wrestler every year he's ever given a damn. And 2001, 2002, 2004, 2012, 13, 14, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, every year. Who gave him all that? Best faction of the year with the feud, manager of the year, 92. Who was he managing in 1992? It might have been The Undertaker.
Heyman, would it be in the Deadly Alliance?
Yes, it was, yeah.
One of my favourite stables.
Question for you. If you had to, if one of these disappeared off the wrestling face today, which one would make the least impact to the wrestling world?
I think Cornette, because he's not in the
Oh, I meant
wrestling
if
world.
everything disappeared, their entire work.
Everything disappeared. Oh,
That's not easy.
No.
Because then
Because
you're stripping away ECW.
yeah, but then you're also stripping away.
You're stripping away all of the work he did in ROH because he made
Yep.
he basically ran ROH, OVW. You're stripping all those wrestlers away. I mean, I actually honestly think it'd be Pritchard because everyone, there was more. I know he helped with a load of wrestlers, but the rest of them, too much.
Yeah, that's a tough one. Because either way, the wrestling landscape is way different if one of them aren't in it.
You think a lot of people are surprised we didn't put Vinnie Mac on here?
Yeah, probably. Probably. It's like I was saying to you privately. I think for everything that Vince did right at the start of the 90s and like late 80s and the whole period of there, I think the mid 2000s undo a little bit of that because we went from this hype and like wrestling hitting this boom to being lost in the shuffle on like network TV and cable TV and whatnot.
I'm trying to pinpoint the day where it all changed. There was a date, wasn't it, where they went from 1 week they were having chair shots to the head, which I agree which to stop. They're blading, and then the next week you get Batista being fined half his year's wages for it.
I think it was a combination of the awful invasion storyline and the whole get the F out with the World Wildlife Fund.
Oh, I mean, they kept going with the ruthless. I mean, you had ruthless aggression, didn't you? I mean, you had Eddie Guerrero covered in blood in 2005, didn't you?
When did they go PG?
I reckon it was around 2011.
Let's have a little look. 2008.
It's still PG now, but it doesn't feel the same as the PG did a couple of years ago.
No, I agree completely.
Something's changed. Either they're getting away with more, or we've become socially sensitized. But you are seeing more. I mean, I've seen blood, and they don't. I'm not sure they don't make it go black and white anymore, do they? For blood, which is so stupid.
Yeah, it's so weird.
It's like, oh, I can't notice blood. It's in black and white.
Right, I just can't see the colour now.
But no, there's definitely blood. Hang on, was NXT PG?
Yes.
I definitely didn't feel PG.
No. So according to what I'm reading here, the PG era sort of ended in like 2013, which they then called the reality era. So the PG era would have been like your Nexus and that sort of thing.
Oh, it was. Looking back on it now. Oh, is that why they went insane when Daniel Bryan nearly killed Justin Roberts?
Strangled him with the tie, yeah, that sort of thing.
So what is the era called now?
I don't know actually. Modern era, I guess.
Having a look now. PG era. I love it. PG era wrestling. Straight away, first thing. PG era of wrestling. Okay, which began in 2008. It's just called the
post-COVID era.
Okay, 2011 it hit. They're saying, they're saying it's disputed that it's still going now. New era. What is it now? We're the new era. Oh no, new era.
Well, there you go.
New era, post-COVID era. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thunderdome era. Do you remember on Thunderdome where someone had a picture of He Who Must Not Be?
Yes.
They banned him, didn't they?
Oh man, that Thunderdome was a fucking fever dream.
I love this. Vince McMahon's retirement, 2022, disputed.
Crazy, isn't it?
Vince McMahon returns, 2023 awards. Oh, right. Yeah, because it is still I'm going to look at this. Why does WWE not feel PG anymore?
Well, while you're looking that up, what is your decision then? Is it Cornette or is it Heyman for your last spot?
It have to be Heyman, I'm afraid.
Yeah?
Unfortunately.
I would occur with that. I think Cornette just misses out of those two, and just because of longevity, and that is it.
Apparently, Raw was going to shift to TV14 this year, but it never happened because Vince said no. USA Network wanted to shift it back to TV14.
There was loads of talk about that at one point, wasn't there? Loads of rumours about them going to be TV14 again, and it just never happened.
It's because AEW is rated TV14.
I'm assuming it's because Disney was one of the front runners to buy it, and Disney wanted a more PG.
Yeah, the thing is, if you look at WWE audience, it's not what it was about 5 years ago, but you still have 6-year-olds there in their Cena shirts.
Exactly.
It's a lot of money for them to lose. They've got themselves backed into a corner. They may have to do a complete split of type of show.
Yep. Okay, so you're putting Heyman on your Mount Rushmore?
I am putting Heyman on my Mount Rushmore. My Mount Mushroom. Oh, fucking hell.
Here we go.
Oh, I've not taken anything. My Mount Rushmore consists of Jeff Jarrett, Dixie Carter, Paul Heyman, and Paul Levesque.
You say Dixie Carter?
I did not. You're hearing things.
Whereas mine was Jeff Jarrett, Hulk Hogan, Steve Austin, and Tom Pritchard.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, was another episode of Mock the Week with Rhys and Liam.
We will have a part 2 of this conversation talking about our personal favourites within wrestling. So look out for that. But until then, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hopefully we'll see you in the next one.
Take care, guys.
Bye, guys.